Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, Kyle, Reid Hass, and Jeremy Swanton return to the show for 1933's Footlight Parade.
Our guests today are theater and film creators and regular guests on our podcast. They are also co-creators of Act of Faith, which was an official selection at the 2023 Austin Film Festival, which is now streaming on Tubi and Amazon Prime. Kyle, Reid Hass, and Jeremy Swanton return to the show. One of the rare annual guests, I think, in the history of this podcast. You guys have been on every season of the show. You know. So we are so glad that we get to do this.
Every year, to the best of my abilities, they keep overcoming me. So, I guess we got to deal with this shit again.
It's the highlight of the year. Is it 2 against 3 that y'all bring us back?
It's very funny that I think in the very first episode, after we recorded Singing in the Rain, Kyle, you very pointedly were like, yeah, like we'd be happy to do anything. It really doesn't have to be a musical. Like, it does not have to be a musical. We have done 3 more episodes since then, and they've all been musicals, but they're also all because, in one way or another, they have been not just musicals, but musicals that I was specifically like, I really want y'all here to unpack this specifically, right?
Well, this just goes to show the lack of creativity and imagination that runs through Michael Natale. He is the engineer of the show. He's got that part of the brain. I'm the creativity. I'm the fucking artist here. I bring the magic, and this asshole brings the homework. I'm kidding. Not really, but
yeah.
I will say it's a good point because it would get repetitive if we were doing the same thing over and over again. But the 4 musicals that we have covered, they are all 4 vastly different movies that also fit into different segments of the growth of the film industry and the musical's place in the film industry. So on that point, I'll give him his kudos. Good job, Mike.
So we did Singing in the Rain, and then the second season y'all were on, we did Love Me Tonight. The Maurice Chevalier musical. And we had a couple musicals that season, but I was like, I really want to get into this because I really want you guys responding to Chevalier and specifically like this movie and how it fits. We talked about it on that episode, but how it fits into not just how the musical movie evolves, but like what Howard Ashman ends up doing. It just is kind of in the DNA. And then Gigi was one where it was just like, okay, beyond just the music or anything, let's just unpack the legacy of this movie and its complications.
Sure.
When it came down to this season, and I was looking at it with Footlight Parade, this one was just lined up for so many reasons, right? One is, of course, as you guys have become our sort of unofficial musical correspondents, like this is one that is, we finally are talking about Busby Berkeley, which is a name that I think modern cinephiles maybe don't know as well. But
it's also a name that I always mispronounce because I always want to say Busby Berkeley.
So there's that element. There's also the Cagney of it all, and these lavish musical performances. But then there's another element that I have kept from Tom until this because I knew he would get mad. There's another reason you guys had to be on for Footlight Parade, because on various episodes of this show and in our personal lives, Kyle, Jeremy, you guys and I have all lamented the loss of the great movie ride in Walt Disney World, Florida. And Footlight Parade was one of the 7 movies represented in animatronic form on that ride. You would ride past Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, and you'd be like, I know who that is. And then you'd ride past Ripley and Alien, and you'd be like, I know what that is. And then there'd be a bunch of women in bathing suits on a giant fountain, and you'd go, what is this exactly? What's going on? I'm very confused. Not mad, to be clear, but it was that thing of every other part of the great movie ride was a thing that had permeated the culture, right? None of us had seen Alien when we rode that ride. But you knew what Alien was, right? I shouldn't say none of us. I don't know what y'all's childhoods were like.
No, I was not allowed to watch anything that might give me nightmares that my parents didn't want to deal with.
And I was watching True Blood at, way too young of an age. So,
well, I mean, doesn't that kind of get into shit we've talked about in the past, where like by the time like Mike was going on this ride and being confused at what is this musical thing that's happening in my theme park ride, the musical in movies was dead.
Yeah,
well,
like,
I mean,
it was kind of like not a thing, and especially in the 90s, I feel like.
And the other thing too, I mean, is that there are in that ride there were two other musicals represented, right? There's Wizard of Oz, and they're singing "We're Off to See the Wizard," which everybody knew. Yeah. Oh, or is there three? Is Singing in the Rain in it?
Singing in the Rain.
Okay, so Singing in the Rain, which we all know Singing in the Rain even then, and then and Mary Poppins, right? Which are all films we still know. But Footlight Parade is a fascinating one in its place in the ride. It's the same way, like the other one that's weird and obscure is the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan is in the ride. Right.
What was the opening year for Great Movie Ride?
Oh, I don't know. It was the 80s, right? Maybe it was 89.
How do you not know?
Yeah, I just felt like you'd know.
I think it was like 89, something around there. But Tom,
Mike,
should
get in the cuck chair. You just got fucked in front of the entire audience.
No, I asked because someone should Google it. Jeremy, our dog just went into the trash and pulled something out and is now
I'm going to go see what that is.
Can you check it out while I pontificate? So, and he almost knocked over his strawberry matcha. I asked because the point you're making, I wonder if at the time it would have been more in the zeitgeist. Before riding the Great Movie Ride, I knew there was a musical movie where a bunch of synchronized swimmers like stood on a giant cake-looking thing, but I didn't know what it was called, and I'd never seen it.
Yeah.
No,
I was going to say it's interesting because I think what ends up happening is, and I think it ends up happening with this film being inducted, is especially at that point, especially older people, Michael Eisner's working on it, they're all older guys. They know Busby Berkeley, but it's a little bit like another film we did this season. We just did The Bank Dick by, the W.C. Fields film, right?
Yeah.
And we both enjoyed that, but like Tom, you were discussing this on the episode too, like you're aware of W.C. Fields through like Looney Tunes parodies or whatever, and you know that like the registry was sitting down going, what just happened?
Our dog, he hates when we do stuff like this because he isn't getting attention. He just knocked over the screen door on our balcony, and the whole thing just came collapsing with a thud. And he tore a hole in it too. And he weighs like 8.5 pounds, so this is a feat to pulled off.
His name's Tobias.
His name is Tobias. He's named after Tobias Ragg of Sweeney Todd. Although some people think it's an Arrested Development thing, which it can be. But anyway, I digress.
I was only saying, like, we talked about with W.C. Fields, like, you could feel the registry going, like, well, obviously a W.C. Fields movie has to be in the registry, right? Like, you have to represent W.C. Fields. Mm-hmm. You feel that both with the registry pick for this and also the Great Movie Ride, that there is this thought of, like, you obviously have to represent, or you know what? It happened in season 2. We did Top Hat, right? Yeah. Now, if you walked up to somebody and went, pick an Astaire Rogers movie, you're probably going to get a bunch of different answers. Not everybody is like, oh, Top Hat's the quintessential, right? Mm-hmm. But they were like, you have to have an Astaire Rogers in there. And I think with Footlight Parade's presence in the Great Movie Ride, it's more the idea of you're riding past it and going like, of course, the Busby Berkeley Bathing Beauties. Rather than people going like, oh, you know what I loved? I always loved watching a movie that has a weird-ass cat dance in the middle. I don't...
Well, one, good for them for calling their shot and, predicting Cats 50 years in advance. But that's actually something I was thinking about when you were discussing, like, all of the other movies in the movie ride and how that, like, this one really stands out in stark contrast, not because it's a musical or anything, but just because it's kind of something I felt like when I was watching the movie, which is that it really is just about the musical scenes. Don't even show that to me. I need to try to sleep tonight.
But the face, it's horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone else is like, and she's like,
Yeah,
Just
that's when they
peak.
all come into the screen one at a time, smiling really big. We paused it and took that picture because
I
she
had to
shows
send
up
it
and
to
she's
Mike.
like, they're
It's
like,
a nightmare. They knew since the 30s it was a nightmare, and yet Tom Hooper just couldn't overcome the challenge.
was he not doing it on purpose? It feels like he knew that it would become a meme, and he wanted to capitalize on meme legend status. Because there's no way he thought this will be like just like a
No, I think he really did think I think he really did, because he won the award for King's Speech, and all his movies have been wildly humorless. And he is British, so we all know, not a funny guy. And at this point, I don't even think he's in movie jail. I think he's in the movie Hague.
Okay.
I think they buried him under Gaddafi.
Well,
I think I just want to have more faith in the human race than that, and so I concoct these narratives in my head to justify the behavior of the Tom Hoopers of the world.
One of the worst decisions me and my friends made once was we were already drunk out of our minds and decided, hey, Cats just hit HBO Max, let's watch it. We got 5 minutes in and just started like, nope, too drunk for this shit, fuck this noise. Yeah, don't do it.
Guys, we cannot be. No, I'm sorry. I'm taking us off this. I don't want to be sitting here talking about, oh, this director was in movie jail, when we should be focused on the topic at hand, a director who was tried several times for murder.
Well, now you got my attention.
Busby Berkeley was in court multiple times for possibly killing a guy.
Well, now I like him even more.
So he was driving drunk, and he was responsible for an automobile crash in which 2 people were killed and 5 seriously injured. He was brought to court in a stretcher, and there were 2 trials. The first 2 trials for second-degree murder ended in hung juries, and he was acquitted in a third. That's Busby Berkeley, the guy.
Did he end up making a movie with John Hughes?
Oh, wondering if that's staying in.
Did Tom Hooper?
Let's find out. No. Tom was referencing a beloved actor who also committed vehicular.
Matthew Broderick killed people in a car accident.
I forgot. I don't. Like I said, I don't remember it.
He lives in the moment. Leave him alone. God damn it. Let him fucking flop. Okay.
I did not anticipate this dynamic happening on this episode, and you know what? It's fine.
It's fine. It's
Here's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna just put this out there for the record. Tom has been doing these YouTube exclusives for us that are live streams, and they're typically just him. But I'm gonna say it. I think, Tom, work it out. There should be one live stream that's just you and Kyle, and let's just see the nightmare that unfolds.
I just walk him through the whole Timeless Tony Storm thing. We watch clips and talk about it.
I think it should be. The same thing. Like, you're doing a franchise as per usual, but it's just one of you has just gotten very fatigued from having to watch them all in a week. What is Kyle's take on the Bad Boys trilogy? Let's find out.
Oh, yeah, you might find out some of it. You'd find out a lot of other stuff too, probably.
It would be. I personally would love to watch Tom be the one sitting there on mic going, we have to get back on topic.
No, but you see, I do actually want to do one of these live things with somebody else, but we're drinking the whole time.
I'll do it. Oh, also, I never really drink.
That's it. Yeah.
So I'll get drunk super fast, and I'll be having a lot of experiences.
That's great. I'll drink like half a bottle, and I'll be like, "Oh, we're done. I'm not even drunk."
Kyle, I love that you say that. The last time you were on this show, the two of you were splitting champagne and bathrobes while discussing Gigi.
Did I not come with a vibe?
You did. If there is one word that you could be that described that night, it was vibe.
Vibe. Vibe was the vibe.
What is it?
By the way,
what does it tell you that Tom, who always says, "I don't remember what I did on this show," can step forward and go, "Yeah, that night was a vibe. That night was a vibe.
It was a vibe." Hey, I always remember and love when I get to watch people other than myself be drunk on camera.
All right, let's get back to Footlight Parade. Let's focus in because...
Also, we'll talk about it later. I watched My Fair Lady after GG. We'll talk about that later. No more sidebars.
Great.
No more sidebars. I liked it.
Yeah.
So let's get ourselves onto Footlight Parade. And I think the best way to do that is that before we talk about Footlight Parade.
So we're not going to wait an hour into the episode like we did last time.
That's happened several episodes. We've forgotten to play this clip. So before we get into why we think Footlight Parade got in and why we think it's significant, let's hear what the Library of Congress had to say. This is what the National Film Registry had to say about Footlight Parade.
Directed by Lloyd Bacon, Footlight Parade is one of the best of Warner Brothers showbiz musicals, with James Cagney turning in a dynamite performance as a theatrical producer who finds that talking pictures are cutting into his business. Turning lemons to lemonade, he begins to produce musical preludes for the pictures. Busby Berkeley contributed his signature production numbers, including his first water ballet, By a Waterfall, as well as Shanghai Lil and Honeymoon Hotel. Joan Blondell is Cagney's Gal Friday, and Dick Powell and Ruby Keeler are the young stars who croon and tap their way to romance and fame.
Woo!
It's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. So
I really hope Amanda didn't watch this movie because she would probably not be very pleased with the Shanghai Lil stuff.
No. So
No. No.
Are we going right away?
Well, do we talk about that first?
we're gonna get there. I want to address
Okay.
right up top. So one of the things that I love about that registry statement is that I have seen Footlight Parade a number of times since I was very young. Because of the Great Movie Ride, I was like, I wanted to watch every movie on the Great Movie Ride, and I remember that my mom was basically like, I'm gonna let you do most of them. She was like, you're not renting Alien, that's rated R. You're not renting Unforgiven, like those are off the table. And then my dad was just like, no, fuck it, we're watching Alien. But she did.
Hell yeah.
We did go see. We did go to Blockbuster and rent Footlight Parade, and so I've seen this so many times, and yet I kind of always forget that it's about staging prologues before movies, because what happens anytime you watch Footlight Parade and Jimmy Cagney is talking about, well, we're gonna have 5 prologues before 5 shows, is that your brain just goes, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, no,
That's
honestly,
not a
that is
thing.
actually a problem I kept having, because I watched it twice in the last 4 days because this came together quickly, and every time I'm watching, I'm like, he must be talking about pre-filmed shows, because what the fuck is a prologue?
Right.
Why is he talking about this? What is happening? What is the business that is constantly being discussed in this movie?
And the best thing about it is that if you're starting to come to grips with it, if you're starting to grasp the idea of like, okay, prologues were live stage shows that happened before movies were screened. If you start to think that you understand what that is, then the Busby Berkeley numbers begin, and you go, none of this could happen live on a stage.
Yeah.
This is all very much filmed.
Right.
No, and that's the thing, because like I literally like looked away at one point, and then I look back, and it's a full-blown musical number, and I'm like, I thought this was supposed to be on a stage in a movie theater, not an elaborate warehouse.
Right. This is very much a thing that I think would have made more sense then. For 2 reasons. One being that you would know what they mean when they say prologue, and number 2, all of the films that we have all seen that have come since, where things that happen in them have a certain continuity that we can come to expect, there is less precedent for what the medium of storytelling in a talking picture that is a musical is. There's only a couple decades of precedent. So it's something where, you know, first of all, they don't have to wrap their heads around, like audiences at the time don't have to wrap their heads around what are they talking about, because they would know what a prologue for a film is. And then when they get to that, I think they're more focused on the spectacle of, oh, because this is a film, we're able to pull you into the number and then do things with it that we couldn't do on a stage. And so the novelty of it would be more exciting as opposed to, I think, now confusing, because we had the same things, of course.
Well, and it's worth noting too.
Well, because Well, no, because I was gonna, like, once you get, like, you kind of got to get used to the movie and what it's doing, because it's one of those musicals where the music is diegetic to the story being told. People aren't just breaking out into song and dance. They're putting on musical numbers, and you go, so your mind's going, okay, it's going to be that kind of musical. So then when the filmmaking shifts, you go, wait, what? But then you realize, okay, it's a movie. They're going for a subjective point of view with the musical's numbers, not an objective point of view. So it's being more cinematic and letting the movie put you in the places of what the characters are feeling as they're singing and dancing on stage, and what the audience should ideally be feeling if James Cagney's doing the show correctly. So you kind of like, you feel like out of step for a bit, but once you get that that's what they're doing, you go, okay, no, I get it. It is a little. It does take a second to align yourself.
And it's worth... Oh, sorry, Kyle, go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the thing is, diegetic musicals, as we know them now, kind of didn't exist at the time yet. Mm-hmm. There was a handful of pre-Golden Age musicals which means like basically pre-1940s musicals that, like, where the songs kind of make sense of the story. Sorry, Jeremy just tripped on my computer charger and stepped on our dog on accident.
You guys are living in a slapstick comedy right now.
I was gonna say it's.
Apropos for the era we're discussing.
Hey, I wish there was like a apartment camp.
Yes,
it's okay.
We've got Larry, Moe, and Curly right here. Come here. I mean, he's probably not curly because he's supposed to be. His breed is supposed to be, and he's supposed to be hypoallergenic, but no, he sheds and his fur isn't curled. Anyway, no, so what I was saying is there's like some of these like Cole Porter musicals, or even some musical films in the 30s, although I don't think this early, I think it'd be more later 30s, start to like play with the idea of the song has anything to do with like the plot in a way that's actually certainly not in terms of drama. If it's like Anything Goes, for example, there might be a love song that's born out of a love scene. And we even see in Love Me Tonight is the other one we watched together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you see it there, where there is actually some really inventive and fresh musical storytelling happening in that. But a lot of those songs didn't really further the story in a way where you're engaged by the storytelling because of the song. The song is more entertaining in a different way than the plot is entertaining in a plot way. So yeah, I'm rambling a bit, but that's it. It almost hadn't been invented yet.
No, I think because it points to also how this film was made and how a lot of the musicals at the time were made. You know, we're talking about Busby Berkeley, right? The registry statement notes Lloyd Bacon as the director of the film, and that's kind of true. But the reality is, what you basically had, you don't really have this in musicals anymore. You do have it a lot in action cinema, which is Busby Berkeley is sort of, you know how now we kind of call them second unit and what have you, but basically the idea was Busby Berkeley would get told, here's 4 songs we got written for this movie. You are going to stage and shoot 4 musical numbers. And the movie is going to give you the setup to those musical numbers happening. When you mention Anything Goes, right? And I know that does integrate more into the plot. But it is the
only
thing.
A little though.
Well,
like
that's
superficially.
You really feel in Anything Goes is a good example of like, yes, it's part of the story, but also like that Cole Porter was just like, I wrote a couple of humdingers.
Exactly.
We're gonna write a plot like you don't. De Lovely is a great song.
Right.
The title song, Anything Goes, is a great song, but there's not like You're the Top is a perfect example of that's a great pop song that needed a showcase.
Exactly.
So they built a show to showcase these songs. Similarly, around this time, studios have begun to realize that having songs is a really good asset. because you can reuse them and you own them, right? So Footlight Parade, is a song delivery film, because similar to how kind of, if you remember, like when we were all young, movies had realized like, oh shit, we can make soundtracks that are called music from and inspired by, and we could just get a cut of music that is like, the perfect example is the first Spider-Man, right? You remember the Sam Raimi Spider-Man when they put up music from and inspired by, and yes, it has the Chad Kroeger song from the movie and it has Macy Gray, but otherwise it's just other songs by bands that are mildly bug themed.
Right.
The Hives are on that soundtrack. Just because their name is The Hives. And like, because studios realized like they could make money doing that. Similarly, in the 30s, Warner Brothers has recognized like, we can own the song and use it forever. Every single one of these songs in this film later gets done as a Merry Melodies short, right? The cat one is now just like cats singing on a bitch. All that, they later get reused because they're like, well, these songs are important, so let's just build a movie around these songs. So basically, what's happening is that at the same time Lloyd Bacon is working on the story part of the film, separately, Busby Berkeley is coming up with how he's going to stage these musical numbers, how he's going to shoot them. And I say action because, and Tom can speak to this more so, but let's not say any names, Tom, to get any, that we shouldn't be saying. But I think a lot of people are aware of the fact that there are certain movies and filmmakers out there where when you talk to people in the industry, they go, they didn't direct those action scenes. There's a
John
guy.
Watts.
So we're not going to name any names. We're going to. There are people, but you know what I'm saying, right, Tom? Like there are people.
No, yes,
action
yes.
guys know, like, oh, that second unit director's a genius, and it's like, 'cause that guy comes in, and it's just like a lot of times, whether it's the director or the studios, they just kind of go like, listen, we know there needs to be a car chase. It's gonna be 5-minute car chase in this movie. This is on you. Like, go forth and make this thing.
Right.
Busby Berkeley, this is kind of the role.
Sorry, you can finish your point.
No, I was just saying, like, Busby Berkeley, like, he did actually solo direct a number of films in his career, including, I was texting Tom about this, including a dark noir film he apparently made
that's
in
awesome.
like the late 30s, which is which rules.
Hey, he has
Rains,
a man
bro.
that's killed people.
It's true. We can say it now,
he has
right?
a G.
His estate can't sue us, right? I don't think.
I mean, if they can, what are they gonna get?
Yeah.
Like, good job, guys.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was gonna say.
I was gonna say something.
Oh, go ahead.
I thought it was really interesting too that when we were talking about, I don't know how songs are getting integrated into the story and just that dynamic, because I noticed, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. There was a couple of references to Showboat in the film, like he says it offhand.
I didn't even notice. I believe
Old Man River. I think he comes up, and then on top of that,
I thought
he
of
says
Showboat,
something
I
about
wasn't
Hammerstein. And so it's interesting just talking about this dynamic that's happening in the Hollywood movie, but then also what's happening on the stage as well, and how music is being used to further the story in different ways and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is cool.
I mean, because it's also this thing, and this happens in the early days of talkies. I bring it up a lot of times, but like you watch any old Jimmy Durante movie, whatever, we're dealing in a period where the talkie isn't just replacing silent cinema. It's also being seen as a threat to theater, right?
Right.
And that's where this whole prologue thing comes in, is that theater and film, kind of all used to be intertwined. They all had their lane, right? If you want to see, you can go to the pictures. They're a nice novelty, right? But you're not going to hear anybody speak. You're not going to see, great performances. You're not going to get vaudeville. You're not going to get music. You're not going to get song and dance. To entice people to come to the theater, especially during the Depression. I mean, movie theaters were saved by these prologues during the Depression because you were getting live performances before the film. Because, quite frankly, at the time, you couldn't really convince people, hey, come out and spend your money to watch, frankly, a rickety talkie in like 1930, 1931. But you see in these...
There's more bang for your buck.
Yeah. But you also see in these old Jimmy Durante movies a lot of lamenting of like the end of vaudeville, the death of vaudeville.
Yes.
And
because they're writing what they know. That's what they're struggling with. That's what they're all scared about. It's like if a screenwriter wrote about like the threat of AI right now, because it's what we're all talking and thinking about.
Yeah, it's very much that, there's this fear, and especially because now, it's a little bit like, if you think about it, I mean, maybe a little less so today, but it's a little bit how like 10 years ago Hollywood's relationship to video games were, right?
Yes.
Which is this attitude of like, we can use parts of this, right? We can certainly try and appeal to this, but it's never going to surpass us, right? Like, that's not a high art. That's a little bit how a lot of people in the theater world looked at moving pictures, was the idea of like, this is a great novelty, like this is great, but it's, people are always going to want the stage. And what's very funny about Footlight Parade, in a way, darkly funny, is the prologue dies out before the end of the 30s, right?
Yep.
This is a movie that is referring to prologues as like, well, this is how theater and film can coexist, right? Like this is the path forward.
That's precious.
It is funny, like watching it now, or just knowing like the fact that we don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. Yeah, and you're just like, oh, this is all just like a wasted effort.
And it's a little
you
bit
guys
like,
are putting all this money, time, and effort, and you could have just, I don't know, like made movies instead. Like, I don't know, man.
It's a remarkable thing. I mean, it's what's fascinating too is like, we talked about these other movies, be it like Singing in the Rain or much later The Artist. There have been a lot of movies, Babylon. There've been a lot of movies decades later about like the struggle of transitioning from sound to talking.
That's what Sunset Boulevard is about too.
Right, Sunset Boulevard.
Or
he doesn't want to let go of the film era.
Hey, straight up, I was like, is this movie like kind of the inspiration for Singing in the Rain? Because it's like straight up the same basic premise of Singing in the Rain. Like,
but all of those happened decades later. When we can look back on the period in hindsight, one of the things that makes Footlight Parade fascinating, setting aside the musical elements or anything, is that it is chronicling this transition as it's happening, right?
Wow, that's interesting.
It's similar to, we were talking about a couple weeks ago on the podcast, but I was talking about a documentary film called In the Year of the Pig, about the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
That was made while the Vietnam War was going on. And it's so much of a different energy than any Vietnam documentary that gets made afterward. Because this is made at a place where it's like, with an energy of like, I genuinely don't know if we're going to nuke Vietnam. Like, I really like, there's a real energy of like, Barry Goldwater could win and we could just blow up Asia. Like, I don't know how this is going to go. And this
I Am Citizen 4, what's going to happen to Edward Snowden?
Right.
Well, it's funny, films. It's just funny thinking about it from that perspective of it's kind of being made in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny how insanely cynical this movie is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh yeah, I was
in a way because like I was thinking about Singing in the Rain the whole time watching this movie, and it's scrappy guy has to recontextualize his place in the industry after the talkies, and I'm just like, interesting. Wow, they're spending a lot of time on these producers fucking him out of money.
Mm-hmm.
They're spending a lot of time on there's a spy in the midst. Oh, there's some dipshit nephew who keeps telling him that he can't do things because of censorship laws before he gets caught fucking his girlfriend in a back room.
I have a thought about this. If you compare the stock market crash to COVID, and you look at how the country recovers in the decade that follows a trauma like that, you can sort of think about when this movie was 1933, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it 35?
Yes.
Okay, 33. Yeah. So as like if a movie were getting made in 2024 or 2023, about like where we're at in terms of processing COVID, there is a cynicism to the movie that is totally informed by a country that has fallen on really hard financial times. And then also like there have been a couple years to process it, but it has a totally different attitude than a film from the late 30s. that has really like accepted and digested that this is the reality of our history. And there's still some escapism to it. Like, it doesn't really ever talk about the Depression, but the echoes of the Depression are everywhere in the film.
And it's fascinating you raise that point. I think it's a tremendous point, by the way. I think it's a great point. But with that, like, it's also worth considering this is not the only musical that year that's in that same vein. This is the same year and shares a lot of the cast of The Gold Diggers of 1933 and 42nd Street.
Yeah.
And people often talk about, people love to cite The Gold Diggers of 1933, the best Great Depression movie, because they never mention the Great Depression, but, it's just people trying to distract themselves, right? During the Great Depression, people trying to distract themselves. Gold Diggers 1933 is a much peppier film, a much less cynical film. Same with 42nd Street. And I think it's fascinating that it's easy to bunch all of these three together. But to the point, both that Tom is making and that you're making, Kyle, about that cynicism and, like, the institution failing. Footlight Parade, despite being part of that group, feels like it's a little edgier. Because there's this air of desperation to it that, especially because, like, the other musicals of that time are trying to be like, maybe you could get the lead role in the picture. Maybe. And this one is just like, James Cagney cannot catch a fucking break.
Right.
It's just not to be crass, but, like, every 5 minutes he's just getting kicked in the dick. Like, it's,
and they're all so afraid of being out of a job in the movie. Like, it has an unspoken weight.
Well, and that's the thing, because of it. Like, even though at the time they didn't know the prologue was a doomed concept, it's still a thing of like, well, we're not really making the big bucks. We're not making movies. We're not being stars. We're just kind of hangers-on trying to survive and make some money. They're not the A-list guys. And yeah, I also think a thing that gives it that edge too is that everyone in this movie, except for the secretary, is kind of a shithead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like James Cagney is a drunk who's just running through women, gets quote unquote, kind of gets a divorce right at the beginning of the movie because his wife, bitch that she is not rich enough for her. Finds another one who's just clearly a gold digger, who the secretary sniffs out immediately. I love when he figures out that the whole plot of this movie is basically just like about bulk purchasing. It's just like, hey, Costco before Costco. When he's getting the aspirin, and then he runs into his producers, like, I was buying aspirin, and they go, drunk again, and just like, oh right, this guy's a drunk, lecherous kind of shitheel. He's surrounded by thieving, imbecile producers. His musical dance choreographer is like a guy consistently on the edge of a nervous breakdown.
Yep.
You got the idiot nephew. You got the like. It's just
the girlfriend
is a shithead.
Naughty stories.
What's that?
Do you remember that part? His girlfriend reads naughty stories.
Mm-hmm.
Vivian.
Yes. Oh my god! One of my favorite lines, which
amazing.
just reminds me of that, is when the secretary tells the girlfriend, "You're lucky. There's always going to be sidewalks because you'll always have a job."
Yeah, it's such a good thing.
that.
I was like, God damn.
Well, that's one of two incredible pre-code moments in that movie.
Yes.
Because the other one that Joan Blondell has is, of course, when it's I'm familiar with Miss Rich.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you did that.
Yeah.
I never try to do anything particularly objectifying on this show. I think that's not viewed favorably.
How can you say that when you dress like that? Look at you, you Adonis of a man.
Let me make my point. I try not to do anything, but I try not to talk about people just in terms of, I try not to get Tex Avery wolf jaw dropping on this show.
How valiant
inappropriate. But
that's right. I feel that role.
But that said, one of my observations throughout this whole thing was just the most unrealistic thing in this movie is not the elaborate musical numbers supposedly happening on the stage. It's the fact that James Cagney or any human being can think of anything other than, why am I doing these why am I not just running off with Joan Blondell immediately?
Why is Joan Blondell not suffocating me by sitting on my face right now?
Right. It's truly like, and I watched another film because she did a number of films with Cagney. They loved working with each other.
Yeah.
They did a film
They loved working.
called Blonde Crazy from 31. There is a full bathtub scene for Joan Blondell in that where you're just Will Hayes and the Hayes, like the people at the Hayes office would have had a heart attack if they saw it. It's truly wild where Cagney just keeps she's in the bathtub and he's at the bathroom door and he just keeps half opening the door. He's not looking in, but he just keeps opening the door just to hear her freak out that he might see her undressed. Great stuff. The chemistry the two of them have is off the charts in this movie.
Yeah.
I adore Joan Blondell in this film.
Well, okay, so I don't want to talk too much, and I'm more interested in this other point I'm going to make, but I'll say it in one sentence. The story obviously is hung together by their amazing dynamic, and I actually thought it was refreshing for the era and it being a musical, and the song's not really furthering the story, that it was an engaging story, and it was really their relationship that made it that. But what you said earlier, Mike, about the narrative of 42nd Street. This is a topic that we just spent hours talking about with Dana, our co-writer on Act of Faith for seasons 2 and 3, because it's sort of the central theme of seasons 2 and 3 of Act of Faith, and kind of retroactively season 1 as that we're processing what we're trying to say. And that's that the religion of Broadway, or the mythology of Broadway, is as much a religion as fundamental Christianity in the American zeitgeist. And the Great Depression is a big part of that, because the American Cinderella story is A Star is Born. And it whether it's A Star is Born or Lullaby of Broadway, 42nd Street, any of these films, because what happened in the 30s is that it became kind of impossible to produce Broadway shows in the same way that it was in the 20s financially, and there was unionizing happening, which is great, but the producers obviously saw it as not feasible financially during a depression as the unions were happening. So a lot of people, like the creatives of who ran Broadway in the 20s, moved to Hollywood after the stock market crash, and spent the whole decade, the 1930s, working in Hollywood, either as songwriters or filmmakers, and they made films about Broadway and about New York, and a thing that wasn't really happening during the decade became a thing that was happening on screen in Hollywood for the decade, which was all of these stars getting discovered on Broadway. And it was always the same narrative of a small town girl with a suitcase and a dream who would come to New York and had never taken lessons in singing or dancing and wasn't informed about the industry, and would beat out all of these girls who were. And this clueless, shy girl who doesn't even really care about musical theater then became she's everywhere in the industry, and she's everywhere in Hollywood and on Broadway. And I mean, Lady Gaga just played her in this last Star is Born.
It's in Wicked too. It's Alba cops off the train and she's holding the suitcase.
They
Wicked
purposely, it's such a trope, the get fresh off the train with the suitcase and a dream, that Elphaba no longer needed to have the suitcase in the scene because she wasn't on the platform anymore, and they actually had to write in a line about it so that, because none of the other students are really holding their luggage. But they have her still holding her luggage so that when she runs on during Dear Old Shiz, it evokes that feeling. It's it's the character in, is her name Star to Be, the character in Annie?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a character in Annie who literally just sings a solo in NYC, the song, which is she comes out and she belts about how tomorrow she's going to live in a penthouse because she's going to be a big star. She just got here this morning, $3, 2 bags, 1 me, and they're capturing a trope. It's our Cinderella story, and it comes from the fact that all of the creatives, they couldn't do it in New York in the 30s, so they did it on the screen, and they created a mythology, really a religion, to get themselves through those hard times. About Broadway became I don't know, this mythical place Neverland or what's the island in South Pacific?
High.
Bali High, yeah, or Salt Lake City. You know, it's a thing. That Broadway, this literal place, became this actual industry where real people work and have jobs. That became heaven. It's in Fame. I'm going to make it to heaven. I'm going to learn how to fly. I'm going to live forever. Fame becomes immortality in our country, and so it becomes the new heaven. It becomes the new penance. Is like, well, tomorrow I'll be famous in entertainment.
Which I think is really interesting too. I mean, if you look at the James Cagney character, you know, it's kind of it does remind me of, you know, him having to go into the final song at the end and, you know, save the day. You know, that's such a, I think it goes hand in hand with that in the same way. But I also found it refreshing too when they were doing the open call, that scene where they were just going through the girls and they would have them sing and stuff like that. It was reminiscent of a time that was lost, and, you know, them. I don't know what I'm trying to say. You probably pick up what I'm thinking.
No, that's
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it's refreshing to see that, to me, in a way that the Peggy Sawyer of 42nd Street, like,
it goes back to embody. What Mike was saying, that and Tom, that this is more of a like gritty film of the 1933 musicals.
And I want
because it's kind of
sorry, Tom, do you want to?
No.
I just want to raise a couple points on that. Amidst that, I mean, one, real quick, Kyle, you don't need to remind us about the girls singing in NYC, because that gave us one of the greatest 30 Rock jokes of all time. You guys remember
what
this?
What is it? I don't remember.
It's like one of the earliest episodes. It's Liz Lemon talking about New York, and a girl steps off the bus and just goes, "In NYC, $3, 2 bags, 1 me. Pardon me, miss. Do you know where a young prostitute can get her start?" Incredibly specific bit.
That's so good.
Now, another interesting thing I thought amidst all that, which is not responding to your point per se, but it was something I thought was fascinating, that we're trying to talk about what sets Footlight Parade apart, right? Because it is one of this, like, it's a fascinating thing, you know, if you ask somebody the best musical movie of 1933, they might not even say Footlight Parade, because, like I said, you have Gold Digger's 33, you have 42nd Street, and all of these aspirational musicals, the ones you're describing, right? The ones that are all, the girl gets off the bus with a dream, are so nebulous and so impossible to kind of source that, Kyle, you mentioned the song Lullaby of Broadway, and you attributed it to 42nd Street. Now, that is because when they did 42nd Street on Broadway, they loved singing Lullaby of Broadway. So, like you, and then like anybody, like, I just assumed, like, that's what it's from. There's a 42nd Street movie. And then I watched the 42nd Street movie and went, where the fuck was Lullaby of Broadway? It's not from 42nd Street. It shows up in The Gold Diggers of 1935. These are all, like, all of those just like Suitcase in a Dream musicals you're describing. It's not just that there's a trope. It's that it becomes basically the skeletal structure on which people are just throwing new songs.
Yes.
And so that is another element of, if we're looking at it and kind of going, well, why Footlight Parade over Gold Diggers of 33 or 42nd Street or any? It is this fact that, like, just like you were describing there, you know, that this certainly has some elements of what you were saying about the theater as religion to it, right? But I do think that more so than even that, it is this thing of, in Footlight Parade, more this idea of a lot of people looking at this going, well, if we don't have the theater anymore, where are we all going to go? You know,
right.
Like, we have, you know, it's like walking around going, oh my, we have no marketable skills at this point. Like, where is this going to go? So I think, you know, I just thought that was a fascinating underside.
No, it is.
Describing there, yeah.
Well, yeah, because everything.
I mean, even James Cagney's character, I think it's amazing that he kept so many people. Like, it's the unspoken truth, but he keeps so many people employed during the Great Depression by having them, you know, do this, you know, and it's very admirable. And I mean, as people who were working off Broadway prior to the pandemic, and then, you know, our entire industry really just being shaken up, and then how are we going to keep musicals alive, you know, by making this TV show and stuff like that, like just having it be like a little dot on, you know, the grand scheme of things. It's like, it's interesting how when, you know, something is dying or something is no longer in a spot where it can be accessible or even functioning, like what do we as humans like do to try and still keep this alive, you know? And so it is interesting that, you know, this is 1933 and they're, you know, trying to figure out how to keep the spectacle of the follies and, you know, the beauty of what the 1920 pre 1920, you know, the 1920s and before that Broadway, what it was, you know, alive, but through film. So I don't know, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it definitely, this film stands up. I think I went off on that whole tangent about this whole concept of well, first of all, because what you said tied so perfect. I literally used 42nd Street as a reference in our conversation earlier today with our writing partner, to be like this whole trope took over Hollywood during this time. But what's interesting about this film is that it actually doesn't fit into that trope. And like you were saying, is that the character who gets rewarded, in terms of the young girl who really becomes a star in the story, is the brunette, and her personality doesn't fit into this trope at all. She's been around the block in the industry. She actually has tried to work as a performer, which they don't explicitly say, but it's like a blink and you'll miss it moment where she's like, she says she wants to take up dancing again. And the way she says it and in the context, there's this implication that she really tried to make it as a performer, had no success, and then settled with a desk job so that she could still be in the industry somehow. And then this is her getting a burst of one last like hope that she might be able to make it. And that is actually closer to how the industry really works, that people stick around and outlast. Like if you're not like, if it isn't nepotism, if it isn't connections, if it isn't like you had sex with the right person, because that is really, I say that not as a joke, like that's seriously a big part of how it works, unfortunately. But if it isn't one of those things, a lot of people will just, I heard someone once describe the metaphor of taking your card at a deli and waiting for them to call your number. And, but it's a deli where there's so many orders, they might not get to your number. And so she stuck around, kept the relationships. And a lot of times the people who make it are the people who are willing to wait around for their number to be called and outlast the people who give up on and go to another deli that doesn't make the meat that they exactly want.
That's that other line in the film where you said, you know, where the person says, you know, I want to quit, and they say singers never quit; they hang on until somebody knocks them off.
Yes,
I thought was a great take. But the other thing, you know, you mentioned that Ruby Keeler is not the, you know, off the bus with a suitcase trope. Mm-hmm. She is a different trope. And
she is.
She's all thatted in this movie.
Yes, she's the Anthropomorphous.
And that leads to one of my favorite Cagney line deliveries in the movie, when they present her and he looks at her and it hits him who she is, and he just goes, "Oh no."
Which again is fresh. That's fresher than any time that trope got used in the 90s for that to be the reaction.
It's just everything you want is in that reaction of just like, "Oh no, you're gonna try again. Oh dear, don't waste your time. Come on."
Well, and also,
like
not just that, I think the oh no also is, oh no, you were one of the few women in my life who was not trying to become a star. Like, oh, you know, it's the same way, like, you know, I mean, we all have dealt with it a million times. Like, you know, when you talk about being a writer in any capacity, and you're just like, how nice it is when somebody just goes, "Oh, that's nice," and you don't get, you know, I have an idea for a story.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Nice.
I don't need it. I don't want to hear it.
It is nice. Yes.
Yeah, I can come up with the ideas too.
Yeah. I feel like Tom mentioning the Cagney line delivery. We need to talk about Cagney, because the other element of this film, and the one that sets it apart from all the others. I mean, obviously, like I said, I keep talking about that trifecta of 42nd Street, Gold Diggers, 1933, and you know why this one feels different. I mean, another thing to consider: Lloyd Bacon, the director of this film, also did 42nd Street, and Busby Berkeley worked on Gold Diggers in 1933 with Mervyn LeRoy. So the two of them coming together on this are certainly both going, I'm not doing the same thing I just did. But Cagney's what sets this apart, because James Cagney at this point had made The Public Enemy, which also had Joan Blondell in it, and was seen as the epitome of the gangster movie guy, right? We didn't have action movies then the same way that we do now. You basically had westerns and you had gangster movies. And the westerns were kind of cornered by like the William S. Harts transitioning into like the John Waynes, but Cagney was the gangster guy. He was the man's man, he was the tough guy. And that's what he gets slotted in. Even that one I was referencing, Blonde Crazy, which is a light comedy. Yeah. I was watching it, and it's like, it starts out, and it's like, oh, he's a bellboy in a hotel. That's a different kind of thing for him. No, he's a con artist. He's a criminal. Like, he's a criminal and everything because he has to be a criminal. And Cagney really pushed to get in Footlight Parade because he came up on the stage. He was a trained dancer. He was a trained theater performer. And he wanted Footlight Parade for two reasons. One is the fact that he wanted to show he could do more things. The other is that he apparently knew that Warner Brothers was circling making the George M. Cohan biopic.
Yes, I was going to mention that.
But at the time, they were looking at Fred Astaire, who would have been terrible.
Yes, and Cagney is perfect for it.
Right, and he wins the Oscar for it eventually.
It's one of my favorite. His recording of Yankee Doodle Dandy is one of the most beautiful, and Give My Regards to Broadway, which are both from the film, are two of my favorite like audio recordings of like anyone singing ever because they make me so emotional. You can hear such a well. First of all, he fully does embody Cohan to the point where when I think about George M. Cohan, I think about Cagney, like, honestly, first, before I even think of Cohan. Yeah, you were like, is he the guy whose statue is in Times Square? I'm like, no, he played him in a movie. But, yeah, what were you going to say, Mike?
Well, no, I mean, honestly, I was just saying, Kyle, it sounds like you're trying to lock in the season 5 movie early, because
I would love I haven't actually watched
next season on the podcast.
Okay, I would love to do it. I haven't watched the movie. I've just listened to the music a lot and watched.
Really? Oh wow!
Two scenes.
The movie's incredible. The dancing is phenomenal. But I was saying with Cagney, so he's really pushing for this because he's seen as the guy, and he's a movie star by this point. Like, make no mistake, but he is in that realm of men are going to the movies to see Jimmy. That's their guy, right? And he is in the position of like, am I going to be able to branch out from this, right?
Right.
And a lot of those kind of guys can't, right? Stallone did not work well with Rhinestone, that kind of thing.
I mean, that's your opinion.
I was trying to explain to my partner when we were watching it, like, what this was like, what Footlight Parade was like. And there are some analogs, people might point to like Hugh Jackman, but it's a little different because when Hugh Jackman got Wolverine, when he was on the press circuit, people were like, and you did Oklahoma, here's some video. The best example I could think of, and it's a little different because obviously he's not like seen as a tough guy, but for people listening, like, to try and understand what the impact Footlight Parade had, the closest equivalent is, so Tom Holland shows up in Civil War, right? In Captain America Civil War as Spider-Man. You don't know who the hell this kid is except Spider-Man.
Unless you are gay, and then you know that you wanted to be him when you were a kid.
But I'm like, you look at me like, you're fucking Spider-Man. You're fucking Spider-Man, and he's having a tough... And the thing that changes that for him is Lip Sync Battle, when he does Singing in the Rain, and then he does Rihanna's Umbrella, because it's not just
This is a great example, yeah.
It was a moment that, like, everybody kind of went, this kid can fucking dance. Like, this kid can fucking move. And all of a sudden, it does not mean that, like, he's been able to pull off something like, Cherry or anything like that, but it did sort of shift him from...
Cherry needed some dance scenes. That's what would have fixed that movie.
But I'm saying, it did... I think that is a moment that sort of shifted where you're like, oh, he has this dance background, he has this musical background that I didn't realize, and otherwise he's playing to an audience that is definitely, it's a similar thing to Cagney. Like, Cagney was making these gangster movies, and up until that point, it was going to be typecast forever. And after Footlight Parade, you talk to anybody who, like, loves old movies, or you talk to, like, my parents, and you're like, who is James Cagney to you? And it's either you really don't know if they're gonna say like, oh, he's the guy from White Heat and Angels with Dirty Faces, like he's the Tommy gun guy, or he's the tap dance guy. It can go either way.
Well, I think a big thing that helped him make that shift is that this movie, he's kind of just doing Cagney.
Yes.
Until the last 10 minutes when he has to get on stage. So if you're going in, oh, I love Jimmy Cagney. Oh, well, let's see this new Jimmy Cagney movie. And you're like, well, it's about prologues and it's in the entertainment industry. But he's still got that energy, he's still got that.
Ass.
Yeah,
he's a hard ass.
He does a musical number because he has no other choice. He literally he falls off of a staircase onto the stage and then has no choice but to perform a musical number.
But by that point, you're so locked in at that point.
Right.
If you're still watching the movie, it's not like you've spent the whole time watching him do
Tom,
song and dance.
What you're describing is how effective musical theater storytelling should always go, where by the time the song and dance is happening, you actually never had that awkward moment where you were like, I don't buy it. When the masters are doing it, you never feel that way. So this is the perfect example of how, and also what I would say is another reason, to your point of why it works when he's able to make the transition, is there isn't a cultural ick, particularly about your manhood relative to musical theater yet, because I think it's newer, and the cultural notion that it's like for girls and sissies just hasn't been established yet. So that's part of it. But also the reason why like musical theater nerds like myself get so excited about the moment that Rodgers and Hart and then Rodgers and Hammerstein invent the musical drama is that it is a beautiful and really challenging art form. I think I've said this on the podcast before. Most musicals are bad, is something that you'll hear me say as someone who loves the art form, because it's really hard to get right. And when you do get it right, it's just the most transcendent, to me, beautiful thing. But people think they understand what it is, and they think they understand how to pull it off. And when you go musical drama, where you're going to use contemporary dramatic writing and pair it with then the character breaks into song, they can't break into song. They have to subtly transition into song. And that whole falls off the stairs thing, and then it's the hand, and then the reveal to his face, is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where it's a seamless transition into, and now a character who you don't think of as like a flamboyant song and dance man is believably performing a musical theater number. That kind of thought and artistry and mastery of craft is what I wish you saw in musicals always, because then they might not make people so uncomfortable and put off.
I do want to. Oh, sorry. Wait.
It
seemed like a punch.
I've been hearing him go.
Yeah.
Well, can we just talk about this interesting idea about how we've talked about, the rags to riches, Stars Born, Cinderella story, and how different Footlight Parade is to that. But then at the same time, for James Cagney, this is the moment that does that for him, and culturally,
it breaks him out of that.
Out of a
right. He becomes the Cinderella who gets to become the gay guy.
I just want to counter one thing though, Kyle, a little bit. I want to because you mentioned there wasn't really a stigma, about men doing musicals, but I would counter that. I think it's very specific because remember, Cagney's the man's man, he's the gangster, right?
Sure.
I don't know if audiences accept him if he is in either of the other two numbers. If he is the happy husband in Honeymoon Hotel, or he is like the lounging...
Oh yeah, he's got to be a guy looking for a whore.
Not just that. Think about it. What is that musical number that he is in? Yes, he is tap dancing and he's performing, but he gets into a barroom brawl, and then he gets into a uniform with the other soldiers and guns. There is it's almost like now, I don't know how often this happens, but there is this energy of okay, we've got a guy who's a bit of a man's man, but he also wants to sing on Broadway. maybe we can get you in Sweeney Todd because there's murder in that. Maybe we
Right.
can get, like, it's gonna have to be, yeah, at the very most you're like, okay, we've got this guy, he wants to sing on Broadway. Fuck, maybe we could do Carousel. Billy Bigelow kills people. Like, that's something. We can give you a knife. We can give you West Side Story. You got a knife. Like, there is that thing of, like, I do think that it's very I'm not disagreeing with you that the stigma was there, but I do think there was this conscious choice of, like, you can buy the gangster.
Well, that's part of why I
think.
think, like, that's part of what I'm saying of, like, why this is, like, the exact right movie for him to break out of it. Because, one, he's not doing it the whole movie. It takes you to the very end. And then when you actually get to him doing it, like you said, he's trolling a whorehouse, looking for his favorite prostitute, gets into a bar fight, and, like, you know, at the end, it's just like, yeah, me and the whore are going to run away. And it's like, yeah, gangster, a tough guy would do that. And it's just like, it's a pretty easy transition for everything. And I got to say, I think it's an underrated element of the movie and its storytelling, which is that it's not a part of the movie, really, that he's like, he wants to be the star.
Yeah. I agree.
Like, in a lot of movies, I feel like after this would have it be like, oh, he's a failed, dancer or singer, and, like, he only does this because he doesn't have the stage presence, and this is his big coming out moment. It's not even, like, you could see, like, in the moments where he's trying to show the choreographer, like, how to do the cat dance, it's like, oh, this guy's a talented dancer. Like, I wonder what that's all about. So then when he's forced onto the stage and has to do it, and he succeeds, and it's this big raucous moment, you're like, oh, okay, this must be a nice little, like, 180 coming, everything's coming together moment for him without it being like this very heavy-handed thematic arc that he has to go through. I think that's actually pretty good.
Yes, it is great. And thank you for saying that, because it actually is making me now, it's at least worth talking about. No spoilers for season 2 of Active Faith, but for one of the characters' arcs, that's making me think that I need to almost revisit some things I said in our meeting earlier, because of how fresh that is.
Is that Tom's role or my role that you're?
Both of you. You play. You play twins.
That seems like a solid.
I was gonna say. What?
You're so ridiculous.
I'm ridiculous.
Well, because to be fair, his only concept of twins is the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
That's fair.
Yeah, fair.
No. What were you said? I actually completely agree with you. I think there's a difference between the stigma I'm referring to and someone just, like, either being pigeonholed as a certain type and it being a good fit.
Yeah.
And that stigma might have existed to some extent then. I don't really know. All I know is it didn't in the same way, just based on the way the musical then gets so embraced for a while by people of all circumstances and genders and whatever. It just doesn't seem to me like that could happen now unless there was a rebrand of what the musical is for straight men, basically, because I feel like even if they liked it, they wouldn't feel like they were allowed to admit that they liked it, because it could be a threat to their manhood in certain contexts, in certain areas, at least in the area I grew up in. A lot of those guys probably wouldn't be like you.
You mentioned Hugh Jackman, and I remember watching an interview of him talking about when he did Boy from Oz, and that was just when X-Men had just come out, and he had people in the audience when he was playing Peter Allen, and so he was kissing a guy, and he heard in the audience some guy yell, "Wolverine, no!" And then he looked up in the audience and laughed, and then kissed the guy because he had to in the play. But again, it's just an interesting conversation to have.
It's funny how much the industry now. I still hear people go, yeah, I'm so sure Hugh Jackman is gay. Like, he's gay. Like, in the musical theater world, everyone thinks that because they watched him play Peter Allen, and it's funny how a story can really fuck with people. Like fiction and films, Hollywood, like going to the movies has that impact on people or a show.
Well, and I think there's also the element of people do this all the time. If somebody is able to occupy both, like, the theater showman world and also the action movie world. People even did it for a long time with somebody like Vin Diesel, just because he liked dance, which is this thing of you can't be able to do it all. You are either like you have to be tricking us somehow, right? Like that you can't be a badass and also like a sensitive intellectual. It's got to be either you're pretending to be tough because you're a sensitive intellectual, or you're a tough guy who Sylvester Stallone puts on glasses, and that means we're supposed to think he's smart. I don't know why I'm taking it to Sly so much.
Sensitive, intellectual, and gay became synonymous because in a lot of people's minds they are. But I think that it's interesting the point you're making. I think about this all the time. I talk about this with our friend Dana a lot, our co-creator of Act of Faith. That the people, I think that what you're touching on, people's egos get threatened because they feel like they have territory over one thing. I think this happens a lot with like, I promise this actually does pertain to the conversation of Cagney in a musical, but like in terms of like women's rights and like reproductive rights, sometimes I think that men get up in arms in the role that women play in society, and then when women want more basic human rights, they go, no, I have my turf and you have yours. And I think it's because their egos get hurt by the concept of like a woman being able to do all that a woman can be and also capable of all the things that a man can do, because they go like, well, what does that say about me? And I think the same thing happens with guys like Hugh Jackman, where it's like, well, if he's capable of being Wolverine and I wouldn't say capable of being Harold Hill, but like trying. He's talented.
Take it out of the woodshed.
He's very talented. And he's good at musicals.
You're gonna give us some trouble right here in our River City comments.
Right
section.
here, I know.
Well, I don't buy that he would. That this is my thing with. So I'll explain myself now in one sentence. I don't buy him as Harold Hill because Robert Preston, who was a sensation originating the role, was a smarmy con artist. Like he had a similar personality to Cagney in this film, and that was what made him as Harold Hill interesting. And Hugh Jackman played him like, I'm a golden age musical theater boy, or at least what the culture now perceives that to be. And I didn't buy him as the traveling. I mean, like there is a case for it being like Robert Morrison's How to Succeed, where he's charming you with his sweetness and his smile. But I just didn't like that as much as
Tom. I'm sorry, I just want to interject, Tom, because I see something happening right here. Harold Hill is also the name of a character in the musical, The Music Man. This is not an elaborate Goodfellas musical under a different title. I just want to be clear.
Well, his name in Goodfellas is Henry Hill.
I know,
Hill.
but I saw that moment for a second where you're like, hey, are they just pronouncing it
No,
wrong?
no. I'm mainly just thinking in my head that I don't even necessarily know if Hugh Jackman's the best example of this, because outside of Wolverine, he really has not had the best time of it in Hollywood.
Real steal.
So.
But that one has been a steady, consistent gig because they keep
it's like okay, it's more like he's been more easily accepted on the stage than doing anything other than Wolverine in movies.
No, you're right.
It's like it's very weird. I mean, we're seeing like he's coming back to it after 7 years ago, making the definitive final goodbye to Wolverine, and then a few failed movies later, it's, well, I'm divorced now, and fuck, I gotta pay that alimony. Shit, I guess I'll stab Deadpool in the balls.
Well, what I think about the Tom Holland example that I think is worth noting is I wonder if anyone listening had this experience, but for me, and I'm sure for you too, the experience of seeing him show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was, oh, Billy Elliot is doing movies now. Because he was one of the original Billy Elliots, in which it was an Elton John musical based on a film, and when in our child in 2000 something, I don't remember the exact year.
For our non-musical listeners, the casting for Billy Elliot, because they were young actors, it was like a Billy Elliot multiverse. right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't always the same Billy. They were talking like, can we nominate 3 different Billy Elliots from 3 different multiverses for the Tony that year? Because obviously you had Earth 1 Billy Elliot, Earth 2 Billy Elliot, Earth 3 Billy Elliot, and they rotated, right? Is that
How many Billy Elliots are in the MCU?
Yeah.
Because there are 2.
Oh, that's a good point. Wait,
Oh,
2?
are there 2? Who I don't remember
Who's
who
the
they.
second one
Well,
again?
Nicholas Hoult
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Well,
is
Hoult- Right, Holt, but then
He
also
just Billy Elliot. Oh, is he in the movie?
in the movie.
yeah,
In the
Okay.
movie, yeah.
Well, but what about wait, Nicholas Hoult? But what about why am I forgetting his name now? He played the Thing in the newest Fantastic Four. Was he not a Billy Elliot at some
Jamie
point?
Bell.
Jamie Bell, was he?
No,
not a
I
Billy
think that
Elliot
was
at
a.
some point?
Was?
I think that was a different thing.
Well,
I-
Oh.
in any case, that
Either way,
that
there's a lot of comic book crossovers these days.
It's
Yay,
interesting.
yay, Hollywood.
What's interesting about it to me is that it's so different now that we almost can't find an exact match to James Cagney.
Yeah.
Because things have changed so much, and the way stunt casting works has changed. And I would say you do bring up a good point, Mike, going back to the whole idea of, well, they had to really be strategic in how they presented Cagney in this film in order for audiences to buy into it. This also just goes back to a horrible thing. What Jimmy Bell
Mike was, he was the original Billy Elliot in like the original film version of it.
Oh, okay.
It
Amazing.
There you
So
go.
electricity.
yeah, I used the song. There's a song that Billy sings called "Electricity" that I always brought into audition, but I couldn't dance. I was never gonna play Billy. It's fine. Anyway, what were we talking about?
You know who's trying to do it now?
What?
What?
You know who's trying to break out of their persona now? And
Who?
it's someone we took a shot at before. It's Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah.
She is actively trying to get out of that dumb, like, big-titted blonde on the soap opera show.
Yeah. And that's
to,
why Barbarella
varying
is a great
degrees.
move. Real smart move.
I mean, hey, listen. I'll give her this credit.
Barbarella.
Immaculate. Weird fucking movie,
Well,
man.
One thing I would point
She
out
kills
with all that,
Christ.
when you talk about the Cagney thing,
Yeah.
and the idea of like, well, that doesn't really happen now. Part of the reason that doesn't happen now is that our action stars are largely only good at action and only need to be good at action, right?
Yeah.
We have stars for specific types of things, whereas in that old studio system, it's my partner and I were watching it,
Good
and when they were doing the bathing beauty sequence, right? And these dancers are diving into the pool and swimming, and she goes, well, did they just like hire a bunch of swimmers? I'm like, no, you had to know how to swim. And she goes, well, what happens if you got cast and you didn't know how to swim? And I was like, you fucking learned. Like, actors back in those days, and we don't really have that anymore, at least not in the same, like, every actor did everything, even if you don't think they did. Even Mr. Masculinity Clark Gable, right? Who, now listen, you only think of Clark Gable in, Gone with the Wind or Mutiny on the Bounty or one of those. He did some musicals, right? Before Bogart was Bogart, he's playing a fancy rich kid in Dark Victory, or like Tom just watched Sabrina recently. Like, you had to be able to do everything. I mean, Kyle can attest to this. Kyle Lampard, we went to a museum exhibit on Fairbanks and Pickford, and they had like Fairbanks's practice swords. He didn't just need to know how to sword fight. He had different swords for the different periods of like, am I going to be a pirate? Am I a musketeer? Am I this? You had to fucking do it. There was no stunt stuff. There was nothing, So basically, all of these old actors, a lot of them had these talents. I mean, there's even, to take it a little later in the period, I mean, it's truly insane. It's a bizarre thing to look at, but it's like one of the last vestiges of studio. There is a musical number that features Ronald Reagan. Now, can he sing? Fuck no. Can he dance? Fuck no. Is it weird? Absolutely. But you just feel in all of these actors this energy of like, it's one of the things you have to do. You have to ride a horse. You have to do a Western. You have to do a musical at some point in your career. These are just two. Lucille Ball did a Western. Like, these things happen.
I don't even necessarily know if for the most part, I don't think people these days really can get pigeonholed because the industry's changed. And we were talking about it before these two got on the mic before, which is we don't make movie stars anymore. we basically have glorified character actors that are just prettier than others. Every time one of the Chris's tries to do a big blockbuster that's not, the one they blew up in, Star Trek, Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever, they don't succeed. But when they start doing their weird character actor shit, people go, "Oh wait, wow, they're actually like." So there's like there are no star personas anymore for people to really get locked into. It is like it will happen sometimes. Yes, I just mentioned Sydney Sweeney because really the only thing she has is her tits are huge, her eyes have no life in them. She's Megan the sequel. So it's a weird thing of just Hollywood back then is different now. Like back then it was really fueled on the star persona, and you would need them to do a lot of different things. And we'll just we'll slide the Cagney persona in here. We'll slide the Bogart persona in this. Where now it's like, oh, I don't know if Hemsworth would fit into whatever the First Omen, but we can get him in Furiosa.
People will buy tickets because it's his name.
Right.
I was gonna say, because this is tied to something that I was thinking about when Mike was talking to, and what you're saying relates to it as well. Is the concept of I went back in my head. I went back to when we talked about Gigi, and when we talk about Lerner and Lowe. They write a lot of songs for people who aren't singers. It's actually something that's like almost their bread and butter. It's in Camelot. It's in My Fair Lady for Rex Harrison, and it's in Gigi. Is the talk singing in a musical? Truly, it was a thing for a long time.
Camelot.
In Camelot, that personalities are what are interesting about performers, and their charisma, their star power, and what they bring is the vibe they bring, and that's their brand, and that's who they are. And I missed that. It's something that I want to bring back. It's it permeates Broadway too, and it's a joke that I've made before going into Sardi's with a friend of ours who's a caricature artist has joked about the caricatures at Sardi's now, because Sardi's. So for people who don't know, Sardi's is like a bar restaurant in New York where there's caricatures of Broadway stars, and it's sort of like almost like a Hollywood Walk of Fame, like your star on the Walk of Fame thing for Broadway performers to have a caricature at Sardi's. But these caricatures, they can't even find features to exaggerate on the faces of the stars anymore because they're not stars. They don't have anything interesting about their faces, so they have to he's made jokes about having the generic white musical theater girl face that he draws onto a bunch of different Broadway actresses because they keep casting dime a dozen people in lead roles.
Isn't that kind of the discussion people have been having the last 10, 15 years, which is that all the big iconic American action roles or whatever roles are being filled by Australians and Brits because America's not really in the business of making interesting faces
or the ingenue is in the 40s. Our age range for it's too late for you to be the leading role or the ingenue has gotten so high now, especially on Broadway where you're farther away from the actors. There's a little bit more suspense of disbelief, also just with the nature of the medium. But you can have Aaron Tveit, I feel was in his late 30s, if not early 40s, when he was playing Christian in Moulin Rouge, who is the young boy who just moved to France and is a young writer struggling, and he's 40. But it's because they don't.
But then he had no business going to Sweeney Todd. Is all I'm saying. You know what I mean? Why is that?
I'm sure he sucked, and he's so talented. He's so talented.
This was. Listen, absolutely. I have nothing but positive things to say about the production of Sweeney Todd, and you definitely can't find a stream of texts that I sent after that show that disagree with that. Not at all. What a weird choice. Anyway, I do want to say one thing interesting about, because we mentioned this with another musical, you're talking about caricatures, right? You're talking about, obviously not just drawn caricatures, but talking about iconography to really show how much Cagney was sort of pigeonholed in that period. Anything Goes, right? The Broadway musical, which comes out in 34, 38, something like that. I think 34, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't remember the exact. It's the 30s.
In the script of Anything Goes, if you remember, the boss, So there's the main character's name is Billy something, right?
Yeah.
And he has a boss, and his. Oh no, sorry, it's the British guy. It's the British guy that is his romantic rival. Anyway, the British guy, Lord Henry, who gives a shit. But anyway, the point is, at one point, the British guy comes in and he goes, "Oh, I have an impression for you, you dirty rat, you dirty stinking rat."
I remember that scene.
And I forget what the punchline is, right? But in the script, it's like he does an impression of James Cagney.
Yeah.
That at this point, James Cagney was so, in most people's minds, so far removed from the concept of a musical that there is a gag about this stuffy British guy doing Cagney by making a gun with his fingers and going, "You dirty double-crossing rat." It's just, and now again, like that's one of those things that is just kind of, it's, you know what it is? It's almost like, I imagine it is almost like when, if a Gen Z kid is watching a TV show that goes, that rapper Will Smith. What do you mean rapper Will Smith? What are you talking? Whoopi Goldberg, the stand-up comedian. What the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean?
Drake, the formerly living human being.
Right. No, but truly, like, it is a little bit like if somebody was just like, Drake, Degrassi. You're like, I mean, I understand that was a thing he did. I don't know if that's the reference, or it's
Donald Trump, that cultural personality that isn't divisive.
Right. Truly, whenever you hear Donald Trump referenced in a movie now, right, or in a movie like from 20 years ago,
now.
And you're just like, and somebody just goes like, Donald Trump, and you get a second, you're like, oh, right, that name meant something different then.
Yeah.
That didn't mean that. Or again, like I brought him up before, but like it is kind of it's Doc Brown talking about Ronald Reagan in Back to the Future. It's like, the actor? What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Oh, I love those movies.
That is like, I just remember that the Cagney is one of the gags in Anything Goes.
Yeah.
Like, again, of that time.
It's funny how because I'm so I've said it probably in every episode you've had us on. I'm so passionate about this idea that I had a friend say it differently at like when we were hanging out recently than I've ever said it. But I've said it a million different ways. But the way he put it was our culture and just people in our country crave Broadway in their entertainment but don't know it. Mm-hmm. That's why people make such a big deal about I'm Just Ken, and it was the thing everyone was talking about was the live performance, because people love Broadway and they love the art form of musical theater. They don't realize it. Bohemian Rhapsody is supposed to be A Night at the Opera is a concept album. Mm-hmm. Bohemian Rhapsody is what is the epitome of musical theater. That song is musical theater. Really all of I can't think of any off the top of my head. Bat Out of Hell, Meatloaf, Jim Steinman. All he ever wanted to do was write musicals. And he wrote and pitched for unproduced musicals. He wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart is from a musical he wrote. It just never got produced. And It's All Coming Back to Me Now was written as a concept for a Wuthering Heights musical. And that song is supposed to be the moment where Heathcliff digs up Kathy's body and he's hallucinating that her corpse is alive. That's what It's All Coming Back to Me Now was written to be. And so there's all of these things, if you look at our culture through all of the decades, where people want musicals and they want Broadway, even MTV and music videos, like narrative music videos, like Michael Jackson's music videos are musical film short films that tell narrative stories. It just, for some reason, when you call it a musical, there's all of these cultural connotations that make like the average Joe American kind of go ick, because I think it's been tied to this like pretentious, inaccessible world of the New York theater. But really, and that's why, and then also like I've said, so many musicals are bad and so many Hollywood musicals suck because of that conversation we had on the last episode about how there's a difference between when you adapt a stage show and when you make a musical film to be a musical film. But when they're adapting the stage shows, they almost always are worse than the stage show. Like one of the few exceptions being Frank Oz directing A Little Shop of Horrors. Like you get those nuggets. I think that's one of the greatest musical films ever made. And so is Muppet Christmas Carol. But like the point I'm trying to make is people don't realize it, but using music, I mean, really, the collaboration of George Lucas or Steven Spielberg with John Williams is Broadway. It is musical theater. It's the leitmotif. It's telling a story with music. Those scenes are that dialogue is written to be a dialogue not only with the actors but with the score.
Well,
and yes.
Well, no, because I mean I feel like we've talked about this before. Musicals may have started on the stage, but they are one of the most, if not the most, pure cinema ideas around. The ability to tell a story through music and the visuals, and in movies you have the cutting to up the tempo of the music and really get to it. You bring up like Lucas and Spielberg with Williams. I mean, we mentioned a Barbarella remake that's coming, but it's helmed by Edgar Wright. And if you watch his movies, what are those if not basically musicals? I mean, Scott Pilgrim in particular is a musical, but the music numbers are fight scenes with also he's got musical numbers. Martin Scorsese. I mean, that's a guy whose whole movies are basically jukebox musicals where Italians get murdered. And, that's kind of like something you watch as an 8-year-old in Brooklyn and your family goes, "Welcome to adulthood." And you go, why did this happen? But that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, no, it is as I've gotten older and I am slowly shedding that skin of that kind of thinking where, I don't like musicals. It's like, no, I do actually like musicals, but to kind of a point you were making, a lot of musicals are bad. And especially a lot of movie musicals are bad. And a lot of times they are telling stories that I either are A, not interested in, or B, are told poorly. I watched, I think a month or two ago, Paint Your Wagon, a totally deranged movie. It's deranged. If I don't know if you've two seen it. I know Mike hasn't. Watch Paint Your Wagon.
I'm watching it.
Because there are like 5 different moments where you go, the movie's doing this now? What? And then you're like, okay, this is what the movie is. And then it changes gears to another deranged topic. And you go, what the fuck is happening? Like, I mean, I do think there's a lot to be said to the idea of there is a, there's an elitism kind of baked into it because of the Broadway thing. You got to go to New York and you got to spend this money on these tickets. And, there was all that discussion for however fucking long it was, like 10 years with Hamilton, where it's like, geez, you can't even get into Hamilton. How's a normal schmo going to get into Hamilton? So there's that. There is the, it's for the fucking gays thing that kind of started cropping up at some point after this movie. And really, I guess it was, in some ways, Hollywood was like, well, the guys aren't liking this stuff, so let's just aim it at the girls, which then sort of solidified that reputation of it being just for girls or gays. And, I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm a horror movie guy. There's a lot of dog-ass shit and nonsense that I have to just crawl through like Andy Dufresne at the end of Shawshank Redemption to find something good. But it's the highs of the genre make crawling through that river of shit kind of worth it in the end. Not Terrifier though.
Or we're deluded and stubborn about the things we love and can't move past when it worked and when it hit us.
Well, that is also true.
There was one other point I wanted to make. Before we move on, real quick. Another layer of diagnosing this issue is that because Broadway musicals are expensive and accessible, and the national tours are also really expensive and don't even go out as often as they could or should, in a way that can really reach people. There's also that the perception people do have, they get from knowing someone who's in a shitty school show or a community show. So like you get, and not that isn't to shit on community or school theater, because I'm really passionate about not shitting on it, because I wish that more love was given to those areas. And again, something that Active Faith is about, that I'd like to write about with seasons 2 and 3. But part of why they have a perception of sucking is because they're underfunded, all this stuff. Regardless of the perception, if you judged sports and how entertaining they can be off of just going to see your sister's kid in like play in a like little league game where they're hardly in the game, and none of the kids could ever be professional sports players, and that's your only context for it, and you're sitting through it waiting for it to be over, which is how a lot of people experience a lot of Americans, that's their only experience ever with theater, is they go to see someone's middle school recital show play thing, and they're not really trying to put on a good show. They're there for the kid. Exactly. They're not there to be entertained.
The art form,
I'll never forget.
But I mean, honestly, some of the most prolific experiences that we've had have been through seeing high schoolers and community theater productions of shows.
People who might not be able to do it professionally have really touched us and moved us more than a lot of the professionals on the stage these days.
Which is, it's funny because it's almost like counter to, like, I brought up horror, which is that so many people get put off by the horror genre because, you go to the movies on a Friday night with your friends or your loved one or whatever. Oh, let's see the new horror movie that's coming out. There's a new Strangers movie coming out, for example. It's like, oh, let's see that. And usually the ones that are released into theaters on weekends, big release, blah, 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 they're expensive, they're glossy, they have nothing to them. So people just go, horror movies, they suck. It's just pretty people running around doing nothing. When in actuality, what you really want is you want to look for the cheaper ones, the ones that feel like they were made by people with passion and are able to dig deeper into the things that make us afraid. It's funny that in like a counterpoint, with horror, you want to go to the community performance, and you don't want to go to the Broadway version of the horror movie. So I think that's it's interesting in their counterbalances in their way.
Yeah.
As we start to wild away, I feel like we
Wild
have
out.
actually kind of under discussed the actual musical numbers in the film. Amazingly. And I want to, because, quite frankly, the one thing that I remember coming away from this movie with, and it still gets stuck in my head. Well, I'm just going to say this. There are 4 musical numbers in this film, right? The 3 at the end and the cat on a fence number.
Yep.
Going around, we'll start with Tom and then Kyle and Jeremy. And I'll answer this. What was your favorite musical number out of all 4? Genuinely. Not just saying Shanghai Lil for shock value, Tom. What is your favorite number in the film?
I have to say Shanghai Lil, because not for the shock value, really, not really. There's a little bit of that there, but honestly, I think it's because this is the moment we came to see this movie. The waterfalls and the swimming dance number is like probably the best, objectively the best one in the movie, but I came here to see a Jimmy Cagney movie, and if the whole juice of the movie is you're going to get to see Jimmy Cagney sing and dance, and I want to see him goddamn sing and dance, and he gets to sing and dance in a whorehouse beating people up, and you do have to unfortunately deal with some of that old school casual racism, which was like, oh, we got through all of this movie with no bullshit. We got 10 minutes left. It's the final musical number. Oh no.
Yeah, there's some really beautiful elements to the number. It's a gorgeous problem.
Yeah.
It is a gorgeous problem. That's what they call me at the bar, by the way.
It is the only one of those 3 numbers that, I mean, you could say a little bit of Honeymoon, but like that number does tell a story that has like a narrative built into it. That ultimately ends with, and the number ends in such a way that you would think this came out in World War II.
Yeah.
You watch it, and you're like, oh, they showed FDR's face. They're showing the NRA symbol. They're on the warship. Surely we're off to go fight the Germans. Oh no, this is just no. It hasn't happened yet. Okay.
Well, it's also interesting too because the songs in this aren't really like related to what's happening in the story. But this one, in a way, almost feels like it is, since it is about him fighting through this crowd of people to get to the woman he loves. And then when that number ends, bam, he runs and says, wait, I've loved you this whole time. Why haven't I been with you? Curtains closed, the end. So there is a bit of like... There is a little bit of like, okay, we're going to end it on a song that does kind of wrap the whole movie up in a weird roundabout way.
I didn't even think of that, Tom, and you're absolutely right. Going on that journey, because he's not supposed to do the number for people who haven't watched it. He ends up doing it because the actor that they've hired is drunk and gets cold feet, and then they get into a fight on the stairs, and you see someone, they don't show you the head, you see that one of them, because they're both wearing tuxes, like lands on the stage, and you don't know which one of them has landed on the stage, but you know. And then you see that it is Cagney. And absolutely, his character needs to be thrown into a situation where he processes the experience of allowing himself to actually escape whatever path life has set him on, and instead pursue the person he really wants to be with, so that he has the courage to actually do that in his personal life. And in that way, it is one of those pre-Golden Age rumblings of when we actually find the musical drama, where being in a musical means the song grows you as a character. So thank you for pointing that out to me.
So what
I do what I can.
What are y'all's favorite numbers in the film?
You can go first.
Thanks. No, I have to say by the waterfall, or by a waterfall. There was something so spectacular about it, and I think that, you know, Shanghai Lil is spectacular in the same way. Just seeing how many people, like I was reading about it last night, like over 400 people were in that swimming pool, you know, alone, you know, and it's just, you don't see that anymore in musicals. You don't see that in real life. And, you know, bringing it back to what we were talking about with I'm Just Ken, you know what I mean? You have to have By the Waterfall in order to have something like that happen now, you know?
Yeah.
It paved the way for so many different, iconic, beautiful moments and stuff like that to me. So I that's why I loved it. I wrote down sitting on a backyard fence, but I don't remember why I wrote it down. So something about
I'm gonna guess it's the costumes. I guess it's those weird ass cat costumes.
I think it was that, probably.
And just how insanely horny that number is. That is a
of course
wildly horny number.
Well, arguably all of them
so
are.
is cats.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's worth. But you know, you're talking about the waterfalls. The other thing is, you got that camera. The amount of time, not just doing the takes, but the camera is above the water, in the water, and also beneath the water at one point. Like, and you know, I'm sure we all caught it. But one of the craziest things is that you watch this and you watch that sequence of the camera going up under the woman's legs as she's kicking, and you're like, oh, a young Steven Spielberg watched Footlight Parade and went, but what if she got eaten by a shark? And that's Jaws.
Yeah.
Like, the shot, one of the most famous shots in Jaws is lifted from Footlight Parade. What an incredible thing.
Also, wait, Mike, you said that and made me think of the opening of Temple of Doom and how I feel like this movie definitely influenced that sequence. In that it's happening on a stage in a club, and then we go into a soundstage, and then we come out of a soundstage, and that number could never have happened in that environment. And then Temple of Doom is less grounded than that. It sets the expectations of how wild the rest of the film is going to be. Anything can happen in this land.
Arguably influenced his West Side take as well.
Oh yeah.
You know,
and how much of the casual racism of Temple of Doom too.
Yeah.
Well,
I was thinking that. But...
Yeah. I was reading about what.
Kyle? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I have such a hard time following any sort of structure, it's a problem. It's a me issue. No, I don't know how to have one. I think that I'm gonna say Hollywood Hotel because it's
Honeymoon
one
Hotel,
of the
yeah.
It's one of the three. Honeymoon Hotel. Yeah, thank you. It's one of the like three that I'm trying to decide between, and we haven't talked about it yet. But the reason, so I'll give my reasons for why that's one of the ones I want to pick, is because I thought a lot about the art form of musical theater and the history while I was watching that number. It was the first time over the course of watching the film. Is it the second or third number in the film? I don't remember.
Second, if you count the cat number in the middle of the movie, is the first, but it's the first of the three prologue performances.
Yes. So I think probably because it's the first of the prologue numbers, and it occurred to me suddenly, oh, this is doing that Anything Goes from Temple of Doom thing, or I think of the '90s Joseph movie. Josie the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which the whole film is the same thing. It's a church. Well, it's like a Christian school or a Catholic school or something, and they're reading the Bible on a stage and they're putting on a play. But then all of a sudden, it becomes Hollywood sound stages and this transformative musical theater thing. But holy crap! There's a giant spider on the wall. That is a scary looking spider. Anyway, because it was the first time that I really had that transformative experience watching the movie, because I don't know why, but I just didn't process the cat number that way. I was like, wait a second, this is doing something really interesting in that it's saying, hey, these are supposed to be preludes, live preludes performed before films, but because we're using film, we're going to do things we couldn't do on a stage with the storytelling of this number. And then I was thinking about how really, this is something I think about all the time, is the tension between art and entertainment. And when you're an entertainment artist, it's an oxymoron, and you have to scrap. It's not only just two different skills; it's two opposing skills. Art is what you do for yourself, to quote Sunday in the Park with George. But then, like, entertainment is like basically prostitution, and so it's like keeping people happy and entertained while also expressing yourself as an artist is the way to make things that people really seem to love. And it's hard to do. This leans more toward this genre of the way you described it, Mike, was like having a separate person come in and just direct these like set pieces almost. It's like the concept of variety hour, or like the original Muppets show, where every episode may or may not have a story string it all together, and then they figured out that was more entertaining, so they started to. But the story stringing it together is like Fozzie Bear is sad, and he's sad, and you see him be sad in different rooms in the theater. But really, the show is riffing on variety hour. It's, we bring in this kind of entertainment, that kind of entertainment, that kind of entertainment, and how from that place, this beautiful art form of cohesive storytelling that is as entertaining as possible is born. Something about watching Honeymoon Hotel, which had a whole narrative arc to it that was just for the film, but also, like, to the point Tom made, these two characters that are like the B couple in the film, they have an arc over the course of the film where they're into each other, then they're like frustrated with each other, and then we see them do a number where they get married, go have their honeymoon, and finally have sex. And that's, I don't know, that it was maybe that's why I thought about it, but that first, I can't even put my finger. I'm verbally processing because I'm trying to figure out what it was, and I'm just going to give up. Something about it really made me think about the history of this art form that I love so much, and made me appreciate all of these entries that might not even be like, we knew exactly what I meant with Temple of Doom, or what you meant with Jaws, but we all probably wouldn't have watched Footlight Parade had you not, or maybe you would have, Mike, but like, we might not have all watched it had we not been making this episode. But I'm so glad that I did, because I'm sure so many people, whoever, it was the 80s when they made the Great Movie Ride, but whoever made said this needs to be in the Great Movie Ride. Like it probably gave a lot of brilliant ideas to a lot of artists who made things that we love. And I love appreciating.
Be our
these things.
guest. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Really
Totally. Be our guest references this when the silverware are all on the cake. You know.
Well,
I
have a one movie in particular stood out to me as a reference that I didn't think would have been referencing this movie, which is the idea of the stage show being shot subjectively for us, so it's more cinematic, but we know within the world of the movie where they're watching a stage show. So that reminded me of what Tarantino did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when we see him shooting the episode of
Bounty
what's
Law.
the show? Bounty Law.
No, sorry, it's
no, it's not.
It's a guest spot on, I don't remember now.
But the show, I'm having a brain fart. I'll remember like 5 minutes after we're done recording. But they're shooting that episode, and he's shooting it like it's a movie. So what we're seeing is it looks like a big cinematic widescreen Western of the time. But then, like, when we pull out and we see that they're not shooting, it's like, no, they're just shooting it like a TV show. You know, so he's putting you in the minds of the characters and how they feel as they're shooting it, not the actual reality of what's being shot. So, is this the first movie that did it? Who can say? Probably not me, because I'm a dummy. There's probably been movies afterwards that did it, that maybe he particularly used as inspiration? Maybe. But I see it here. I see the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood connection. He's a real freak about movies, so honestly, he probably was like, yeah, I love that technique. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, Kyle, you just talked about how your favorite was Honeymoon Hotel because it made you think about the entire spectrum and history of the musical format. My favorite is also Honeymoon Hotel, but I now look like a big dummy because I like it because it done got the bawdy jokes. No, but truly, like, I think about Honeymoon, like, that melody lives in my brain because it is so pre-code, right?
Yeah.
It is doing jokes that still, like, when I was watching it in prep for this, I still laugh at it. Like, some of the bits are still really good, and it's also this thing of, like, it's my favorite kind of old-timey bawdiness, which is nobody's explicit, but like, it's a whole musical number looking at the crowd and winking and being like, you know. And not just about the honeymoon, but like the line that cracks me up every fucking time is because it's doing one of the great lost art forms of musicals, which is a bunch of people singing what their job is.
Yes.
Where it's just, I will make sure that you get to your room. And then
the mamas.
Exactly. The French maid. The two lines that kill me. First is the French maid just going, "Bridal suites are never very idle." Great. But then you get the, we're the house detectives and we have trouble with. No one ever stops here unless their name is Smith. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just an excellent execution of two jokes in one. One, everybody showing up at the Honeymoon Hotel is having an illicit affair and faking their name. Two, Jersey cops are too stupid to understand that everybody is giving a fake name at this hotel. You get a 2-for-1 on that one.
Such a good point.
It's kind of incredible.
And we know it's true. They are too stupid.
Drowsy chaperone. Oh, we're pastry chefs. We cross our hearts. We're pastry chefs. No fakery. A bakery is what we've got.
And then, like, oh my god! Then when it's like they go to get married and the letters from the letterbox pop out and form the silhouettes. They walk out just as the time the porter goes, "Mr. Smith," and all of the men run over. And then it's time to, like, go get your pajamas on, and the camera pulls out, and we're in basically a dollhouse as all the men walk down to the lavatory, and the women are getting dressed in their kind of negligee, which makes you think, oh, for 1933, this must have been thrilling to, in a wide shot, see women in their underwear, and then for the rest of this movie, every time they're in the car, it's just women in bras. So, God bless him.
Yeah.
But then you have, you've got a lot going on, and then the best moment, which is when the new bride is in her room, and all the other women who are all blonde poke their head out and have that line about, when you're here a week, you get to give advice. Like that whole thing. It's just so, it's so,
It's naughty.
The little
Yes.
boy.
It's depraved. Yeah.
It's bawdy. It's bawdy, and that's what I love. I just, it's such a, I don't know. It really is a thing that, like, I feel like still you can sit down with somebody and put it on. I mean, that's how, my partner was home, and I went, I want you to just see this. I feel like you're not prepared for how blunt they are in this thing for its time.
Yeah. Miss Rich.
Yeah, exactly. But especially like that number when you're just like, they're doing so many sex jokes, and like it, I don't know. It's just, it's one of those things. I don't know. We often make fun of directors in like the 70s, where I make the comment about like Peter Bogdanovich seemingly built his career on going, did you know people before the 60s had sex? Like that seems to be his thing. And it's like you watch something like this and you're like, yeah, of course everybody knows what's going on. We're all doing these bits. God, and the fucking house detectives. I'm sorry. There's just something about them every time.
Yep.
Kills me. Just a great number.
That part is great. That made me think of that whole debate around "Baby It's Cold Outside," whether or not the number is should be the song should not number the song should be canceled as a Christmas song. I remember on The View they were debating it, and Whoopi Goldberg was once like, back in that era everything was innocent. They meant we're gonna snuggle up on the couch at 8 p.m. and drink a cup of cocoa. And whenever I think about her saying that, like, there actually is some truth to what she's saying, but I also think about birds do it, bees do it, educated fleas do it, let's do it, let's fall in love. There is a cleverness postcode to how we wink at the audience, and what innuendo is a subtle art form to skirt past like censorship, so you can still be horny and still make people laugh at how they're horny and we're all horny. And pre-code, they could just kind of do it. Like, it was still subtle and the cultural norms were different, but they could still go there. Like you said, that whole song, it's so clever, that whole song, because you could watch it with a kid, but it's also like the whole thing is about fucking.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't get, I saw that, rented that movie. I didn't get what that number was about. You just hear a line like, honeymooning's going to be my hobby. And you're like, okay, yeah, they're saying the word honeymoon a lot. And then, obviously you get a bit old. I mean, that is kind of the brilliance of it in a way. And the whole movie, like we said, the misbit, joke, any of these gags, is that it was this energy of like, if you know what we're talking about, you're going to laugh, but nobody's going to be confused.
Yes.
No kid
in
in the audience. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
No. Or with the other side of that is with Shanghai Lil.
Yeah.
The subtlety of her being a prostitute.
Yeah.
It isn't subtle in anything other than words, and maybe what she's wearing. Like, if you wanted to make her more explicitly a prostitute, it could have been more revealing. But the way that they are talking about her, the environment, the attitude toward her, and her reputation is all subtle enough that she might just be the girl that all the men go wild for, who is actually not a prostitute, if you're a kid watching it, and I do sometimes miss, I'm glad that we have more freedom to express ourselves. I hate censorship as a dramatic writer, but I do miss sometimes the effort that people put in when they felt like they had to put that effort in.
So, as we wind down, as we often do, I feel bad. We did not acknowledge Dick Powell at all in this conversation. Sorry, Dick Powell. And also my favorite minor character, the guy who shows up and says his job is title thinker-upper.
Oh, that was a great bit.
And it's just him going, the girls of Poughkeepsie, the girls of Pacoima.
Yeah.
I was just trying to show her what you can't do in Kalamazoo.
Well, that guy, yes, excellent stuff. Now, as winding down, as we always do, Tom, how do you think Footlight Parade fared at the Academy Awards that year?
Well, I'm going to take some context clues and you talking about the other musicals that came out this year and what for, and I'm going to say 0 nominations.
That is a good guess, and for the right reason. There is, one of those musicals is nominated. The Best Picture nominees that year were 42nd Street, A Farewell to Arms, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, which we have covered previously on this show. Lady
yeah.
for a Day, Little Women, The Private Life of Henry VIII, She Done Him Wrong, Smilin' Through, State Fair, but not the musical. This is the film based on the play that would then become the musical. But this one is not the musical. And then the winner, Cavalcade, one of the worst Best Picture winners to ever get the award. So
is she Done Him Wrong a Tyler Perry movie?
It is actually a Mae West movie, Tom. So, we were just having a conversation about bawdy jokes and innuendo in film. We'll be talking about She Done Him Wrong on the podcast, and boy howdy, is that just all that movie is bawdy and innuendo. But I wanted to make sure we left a little time. We've talked for quite a while, but I wanted to make sure we left some time. Jeremy and Kyle, thank you for being on, but I really want you guys to throw in some plugs for Act of Faith, because I was discussing it with you before we started recording, but it's one of those things. I know you guys made it, you put it out, and had asked me to check it out, and I threw on an episode on Tubi, and I was like, all right, I'll watch one, I'll get a sense of it, and I binged the entire series in 2 days, and the only reason I didn't do it in one is because I had to stop watching that evening to sleep. I think you guys have made a genuinely, I laughed so much. I think it's a terrific show. I really do. I'm not planning, so I would love for you guys to take a little time to tell folks about Act of Faith, not just the first season, but I know you guys are working on more. Please plug away about what y'all are doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for I know you wouldn't say that unless you meant it, so really thank you for your compliments and just being so supportive of the show. Act of Faith is a musical mockumentary series. It's kind of like Smash meets The Office is kind of how we're talking about
or
it.
Or Glee, if you don't know what Smash is.
Yes.
So we have a few comps that we use when we're pitching it.
It's all original music, and it was our attempt really to we started making it in 2021, and so it was really our attempt to try and keep. We had talked earlier on this show about how you have to be innovative during difficult times in history and stuff like that. So it was our way of keeping musicals alive, by making a TV show that's accessible to other people. And we love that it's on Tubi specifically because, like Tom was saying about Hamilton, and Broadway, it's really hard for people to access musicals and just from a financial standpoint. So Tubi, at least for now, is free. But the show takes place in the Midwest, and it's about this gay man who works at a Christian youth theater company, and he is outed. And so the whole entire series is about his love and passion for the company
and working with kids, teaching theater.
Yes, while simultaneously having the pushback of being gay in a very religious community. And there's larger than life musical numbers. There's references that anyone will love and stuff like that. And so we hope that you check it out and enjoy it.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of feedback that people who don't really even like musicals or think about theater really enjoy the show. And in the same way that you don't have to be passionate about local government to Parks and Recreation or paper to The Office, this is ultimately about people who work in an environment together and are grudgingly at times a community with very different worldviews who have to interact and work together.
So you don't have to like gay people to like this show.
Amazingly, what's funny about that joke is that so the show is created by the two of us, and our friend Dana is the third creator, and she's really big in the Chicago comedy world, the stand-up. She's a great stand-up comedian, and in the comedy scene, people talk about Act of Faith now because one of their own is now the co-creator of a series, and there's a whole debate among kind of the bro-y guys in the comedy scene about whether or not you can like Dana's gay show. Does that make you gay or not? And because there's a gay character on it. I think you could even not be gay and like it.
I started laughing while you were talking because, Tom, I know you haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet, so here's what I'm going to say. Without spoiling too much, Jeremy only described it as a gay man gets outed. There is a visual gag to reveal this guy getting outed. That is... Again, I watched this show months ago, and when Jeremy watched it, I visualized it and just started laughing. It's gloriously absurd. Should we mention, by the way, who plays the lead role in the show? Or not? It's up to you if you want to
We
leave
can't.
this.
Yeah. So Jeremy and I play kind of the romantic leads of the show. I play Ali, the guy that we're talking about, and Jeremy plays one of his supervisors who comes in from a franchise out of state to oversee Ali getting a promotion that there is suspicion over whether or not he and his team can handle this promotion. So Jeremy's character is my sort of cynical supervisor who is won over by my childlike whimsy and dumbness. And so I won't spoil the joke of what you're talking about, but we've been talking about this with Dana. We think why we got selected at Austin Film Festival, which they unofficially kind of call the Writers Festival, because we don't have a ton of production value. We don't have like any Hollywood people, in this show. It's all no-name talent, and it's all very low budget. But we the three of us as writers just have a lot of fun when we're writing together and are really passionate about what we're doing. So we think that that's the one thing we kind of have is falling back on this writing, and then this amazing cast. Like the cast is on it. We're so it's unbelievable that the cast are all just like local, like people we found on backstage. But to your point, Mike, I feel like in reference to how Jeremy described the plot, that is sort of the log line. But what makes the show fresh in this time is that we, as a married gay couple and also playing those two characters and also creating the show, are allowing there to be levity in the situation, because it's like you described that, and it could be boy erased, but it's not. And we actually went on another podcast, and the creator had gone through reparative therapy, was gay, and had gone through that. And he was in his 40s, for context for what years he would have been coming of age gay. But he said that what he loved about our show, he watched it because we were coming on the podcast, but he was afraid to watch it when he heard the logline that it might be triggering, and it wasn't for him, because he felt like it was giving him permission to laugh about the aspects of that whole suppressing yourself because of religious conservative ideology. Like he actually was able to laugh about it. He was actually able to see the humor in it, and he said it was actually really sweet. He was like, "Thank you for telling the story in that way." And it actually was kind of scary as a writer, I just, at least speaking for myself, to write about it in that way, because I was like, are people going to accuse us of making light of the wrong thing or making jokes? Because we do, like you said, like everything, like him getting outed is a joke, like us two like confessing that we're gay. When our characters confess to each other that his character is bisexual, but like, we kind of use the word gay now for an umbrella for anything in the alphabet soup culturally. When they confess that to each other, that is one of the funniest jokes of the episode, of the pilot. And so I think what we do as writers, and what we're continuing to strive to do, is we've all gone through this time that's been just very serious about how we look at these injustices, how we look at these struggles. And I have friends who I grew up with in that environment who have died of suicide, who were gay and repressed. And so I know this is serious. I'm not saying it isn't, but we do need to laugh. And religious fundamentalism is hilarious. And I want people to know that it's okay to laugh. It's okay to, I don't know, find the joy where you can. And and so I would like to think, and my theory right now is that's why the writing has gotten some positive attention. So, but thank you for pointing that out, Mike, because it is true. While the pitch is gay guy gets outed while working at a Christian company, like, it's actually just a really joyful and funny story too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is because you guys had told me that the premise, right? And I remember, like, as the episode is ramping up to that, and going like, this is gonna be. It's a single image. I'm not gonna spoil it, but everybody go on to. It is a single visual gag that has lived here for months. It's just locked away of, again, because I think it is also this thing of, like, you expect that it's going to be a much more serious moment, right? You guys play it very well that you, I think, so I guess I'm maybe spoiling a bit of that.
No, you're not. I'm just so grateful you're saying this, because that was what we were trying to do.
But it is that thing. It's that ramp up of, like, and I think maybe there is this thing too that happens with people when you're watching comedies, and a lot of comedies today where, like, there are these story beats that they feel they need to hit. Right, when you're watching a rom-com, they always feel like they need to have the second act, like, things get serious and somebody walks away in the rain. And you guys never, in this series, fall into that trap, Even the things that would be tropey in other circumstances. Like, there is, again, I'm not going to give too much away, but there is a love triangle-ish story that is introduced, which is incredible for the fact that I don't know how to describe it other than a very confused and at times apathetic love triangle. It's incredible.
That's the perfect way to put it.
And Jeremy, you play that so fucking well with just so I genuinely at points you deliver lines with what can only be described as apathetic enthusiasm, and I mean that, like, in those moments where you need it, where you just, again, without giving much away. But I definitely just wanted to make sure we got that out there to folks, because I really do want to make sure that folks check that out. I give it as resounding an endorsement as I can, and as I told you privately, Jeremy, if I thought it sucked, I would just tell you.
Yes, I believe you.
I'm a prick, so I would just say it. So the
fact I owe you a huge thank you, actually. For those of you that do watch it, we have references to so many classical movie musicals and stuff like that, and the huge impetus for the series, or the first musical number of the series, is a huge reference to the Umbrellas of Cherbourg. I don't know if you caught that, Mike, but I would not have watched that movie had you not recommended it to me. So,
I mean, even I hadn't seen it either.
The whole thing that set it off becoming a musical mockumentary series. So you're a huge part of why it's a musical. So thank you so much for giving us that gift.
So as you guys prep season 2, Tom's going to give you guys a list of shitty Grindhouse movies that he wants you to reference in that.
Do it.
Hats for a Mule and all that,
I have to say how grateful I am, Mike, for what you're saying. Because this is one of the first, like, the whole sleight of hand we do with the tropes of, like, where you expect the story to go is probably the thing in the show that I'm most proud of. That was the hardest work that I did as a writer, and that's the first time I've heard someone. I'm like almost in tears, because that's the first time I've heard someone acknowledge that and put it into words. And that is, like, the number one thing I'm most proud of the whole series. So thank you for saying it. It makes me feel like I'm not crazy, all of this hard work we do, when someone actually can verbalize that even if one person noticed that, all of that, because it's a lot of careful planning to set up a scene where you're hoping that you're in tune with where audiences think it's going to go, so that you can misdirect it. There's a lot of faith, no pun intended, that it requires as a writer and filmmaker to you're just going out on a limb and hoping that your instincts will work. I don't even know how to put it into words. I'm just really grateful. Thank you for that. That's my favorite review I've heard of this series, honestly. ever.
Well, we're so glad, that you made the show. We're so glad that you came on our show. You guys should be
Yes.
immensely proud of what you've achieved. And we look
A
forward
yearly
to
pleasure having you
Yes.
guys on.
Oh,
we look forward
it's
to having you
the
back
highlight of our year.
again.
I mean that.
And we look forward to hearing what's going on with Active Faith Season 2, Season 3. And we look forward to getting we obviously look forward to getting our scripts.
Of course.
Right, Tom, you're looking forward to... right, I mean, I'll...
Oh yeah, obviously I'm good at sticking to a script.
It's easier for me, if I can just shoot it here in New York instead of coming out to you guys.
Yeah.
Tom, on the other hand, has the arbitrary decision that he wants to shoot all of his stuff on location in Colorado. So you got to pay for all that. So just be prepared. It's going to cost a lot. It's in his rider. I couldn't get him out.
Say what now?
I think they need a better agent.
But Kyle, Jeremy, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back. But everybody else, stick around. We'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks.
So this one was interesting. Obviously the impetus with Footlight Parade, you could just go in the musical direction, you can go in the Cagney direction, because there are a number of those Cagney gangster films that are in the registry, like Angels with Dirty Faces. You could go in the direction of Joan Blondell, who I think is incredible in this film. You could pick another Busby Berkeley. But one of the things that struck me, we focused a lot in the early part of our conversation around the concept of a prologue, right? That this film really hinges on the idea of the prologue, which was in vogue at the time, but as we discussed, fell out of fashion before the decade was out, and how it kind of captures that moment. Accidentally is kind of the film that captures the concept of the prologue. And I was thinking of a film that comes along later in the middle of the century that I think is a terrific film that also captures a moment that, unlike the prologue, which this film depicts as something that will likely endure and ends up just being a brief fad, the film I picked depicts something as a brief fad that ended up enduring longer than anybody could have imagined. I'm talking about a 1956 musical comedy film called The Girl Can't Help It. It was recently released on a Criterion disc, so that's how a lot of people found it. That's how I first saw it. It was intended to be a vehicle for Jane Mansfield as a sex symbol. And it's meant to be, the whole premise of the film, it's Jane Mansfield, it's Tom Ewell, who folks might remember from the 7-Year Itch, and Edmund O'Brien, who later wins an Oscar for Barefoot Contessa. Basically, Edmund O'Brien is a rich gangster. He's been to prison or whatever, and Jane Mansfield is his gal, and he wants Tom Ewell to help make her a music star, right? This is a pretty straightforward plot. It wouldn't be terribly remarkable, but for the fact that this movie in 1956 is trying to do a satirical B-plot about the prevalence of this fad called rock and roll. It's treating it, you see this a lot in films of that period. Silk Stockings does that too, with Fred Astaire has a number about how rock and roll is going to fade away in time. And this movie uses rock and roll as the genre of music that he's trying to get her into and ultimately get into himself. And to kind of add flavor to this film, they brought in actual rock and roll stars of the time. This film is a remarkable capturing of 50s rock and roll. It was described as the most potent celebration of rock music ever captured on film. Little Richard, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent all give performances in this film. Even though it's not a movie that was intended to be, a celebration of rock and roll, this was not meant to be the Tammy Show. This was not meant to be, what is later Woodstock or anything like that. this was meant to be kind of laughing at rock and roll conceptually, but it ends up in effect capturing the earliest days of a genre that is admittedly on life support these days, but still with us as a musical genre. Beyond that, it's just incredibly funny. Edmund O'Brien is extremely funny in this film. It's a great looking picture. It's very Looney Tunes-esque in a lot of ways. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, just for representing rock and roll in that era, for being the kind of hard-edged satirical comedy in the same way the Footlight Parade is, but decades later. To say nothing of the Jane Mansfield of it all, to say nothing of this film apparently inspired John Lennon to take up music, all of these things. The Girl Can't Help It absolutely deserves a place in the National Film Registry.
So, like Mike said, bunch of options. With my thinking, I wanted to go with the Cagney element, but the Cagney element that is about trying to get out of a pigeonhole, playing against type. And there's a lot of options you could choose from. The biggest options already in the registry. Once Upon a Time in the West, Henry Fonda. He doesn't eat blueberries in that movie, but he does shoot children. So, 50-50 on your level of enjoyment of that. So what I figured was I would go with a similar casting flipperoo, which is the nice guy playing bad, and playing bad in a genre that Cagney made his name in and was trying to escape with Footlight Parade. I'm going with Road to Perdition, the Tom Hanks picture, where it's first and pretty much only time he's ever played someone that could be qualified as a villain. Even though he's not the antagonist in the movie, he is a mafia hitman, and it's not like a wacky fucking comedy he made with Bronson Pinchot where it's like, oh, he's a wacky hitman. No, he's like a cold-blooded, kind of dead-eyed killer who kind of has lost his humanity and goes on this epic journey with his son to kind of save whatever humanity's left, save the last vestiges of good that exists in him, which is his son. And it's a gangster movie. It's an elevated gangster movie because it's Sam Mendes, and that man can't make anything without letting you know that his farts do smell better than yours. And it is one of the most gorgeous movies ever made. If you're talking like Hall of Fame cinematography, Road to Perdition is getting in there. I might, if I'm feeling salty, say it's his best looking movie, even with Skyfall in the mix. I think what Conrad Hall did as his swan song before passing away with Road to Perdition was unbelievable. You also get Paul Newman in there in a almost kind of a farewell performance too. Live action, obviously. Mike's, I don't want to get Mike's panties in a bunch and ignore his performance in the Cars movies. But it's really for this one, because I do think it's a great movie, but the thing that ties it to this movie is the Tom Hanks, James Cagney element, which is Cagney running away from the gangster thing to play more of a nice guy and get into lighthearted fare, where Hanks was trying to escape the nice guy, America's dad image, and play someone who will mow you down with a Tommy gun without blinking an eye, who will kill his father figure in the rain without blinking an eye. And I think Tom Hanks is amazing at it. I truly wish he would do more movies like this. I've always said for years, like, I would love to see what Quentin can do with him. I would love to see what Scorsese could do with him. Get him in a PTA movie, something like that. Fuck, get him in a Safdie Brothers movie. Let's see what he does with the Safdies. But yeah, I think it's one of the great casting switcheroos of all time, going against type with maybe the best since Henry Fonda in Once Upon a Time in the West. So, I love that movie. It's probably, depending on my mood, it's either this or Skyfall is my favorite Mendes movie. But for the father-son element, the visuals, the Tom Hanks of it all, and Paul Newman, I think this is probably my favorite Mendes, and for better or worse, he's been a big presence in film those last 25 years. He probably needs to be recognized at some point, and I think this is the movie that needs to be put in the registry. So for all of that, Road to Perdition is my pick.
Next week,
Alonso Duralde joins us to talk about Morocco.
Also, the fact that like when she kisses the flower and throws it to Gary Cooper, and everybody's like "ooh" about it. I did not. It was watching it again this time. Made me realize that exact moment is quoted in Victor Victoria. 50 years later, Julie Andrews does the exact same thing. She kisses the carnation lapel and tosses it to James Garner, and everybody's like, "Ooh,"
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natali and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kaya Lampard and edited by Mike Natali and Kaya Lampard. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and rate it. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time. Because we don't watch you, you're watching us.